So Ari and I just finished talking about Outsider and this Oner that he did, and we started talking about Oners, and I thought, screw it, you know what? He and I are going to have a talk about Oners because it's sort of fascinating, and you have so much to say about it. And you know how this started was I asked you, is a fair question for this? How do you decide a Oner? And I think you and I both decided it's like it's not that simple, right? So like this shot, yeah, well, no one's looking at this shot, but just how do you as an operator turn something that's not maybe set up as a Oner into a Oner, or is that the way to do it?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. Like, there's so many times where you're just like, how do we do this as one? The question comes to you like that hour, 10 hours into the day, because it needs to be a one or technically, but not technically, but economically.
Yeah, yeah,
um, but I guess I mean maybe start with the idea of like let's get a little more romantic to start and talk about the wonders that that we like and we love and
yeah,
we were talking about and what led to this conversation when it wasn't recording, just the idea of like these wonders can be, some wonders are very like there's the Goodfellas wonders, there's the action wonders where it's like where it's a bit of show personship. And then for me, like working on shows where there's a lot of like slow dolly push-in oneers or that kind of thing, where it's more about two things. So from Ozark and from The Outsider, the shows that have sort of helped me become someone who can continue to feed my family. um, it's this idea to two things that really come to mind, which you see in that Outsider shot, but even more so in Ozark is like is like first of all like the geography. I'd say not first. Sorry, first of all the blocking of the scene.
yeah.
Like, is there opportunities where characters switch places, or you see you see someone's face. If you see someone's face for their first few lines, and they walk off screen for a line, they come back and they're facing, and then the person comes up to them, and it opens to a two shot. Like, that's the ideal thing, is when you start seeing dynamic blocking, which can be tough, depending on who you're working with and what this, it's like there's so many people that have a, besides obviously us that have a say,
Of course.
and as it should be. So there's the dynamic blocking to me and sometimes you do a shot and it grows to it, which is kind of cool. Like, when Laura Linney was directing Ozark, we had some very simple scenes with her and Jason in the bedroom, and you would just be moving, just and like you see just the two of them are so good, and it's just like you're able to just kind of take a shot that was going to be most of the scene and be like, with a slight adjustment, now it's the rest of the scene, and it just seems to get better and better, and that's kind of like the
Well,
exciting way it grows. Sorry.
and
Yeah.
that's to me in a way it's like, look, it's funny because now that we're talking about this, like there's the Oners that I grew up doing, which were big Steadicam moving shots, right? And to be honest, those aren't, and I say this with a big grain of salt, those are sort of easy, right? Because in a Oner, if nothing is changing, I mean that's the big thing, is something, the shot has to keep growing on some
I think
level, and that's
perfect.
either the actors or the camera or whatever. And when I'm walking through the ER and I'm going 12 rooms through, it's really easy to go, and this person walks in and that person crosses and I pull
Right.
back or whatever. But these shots that you're talking about, like Ozark, is a great example of just these slow compresses or pull outs where something happens. But the reason why Laura and Jason could take something that maybe originally needed a cut, at least this is my view, I'm wondering what you think,
Yeah.
and continue it and go, no, this all plays as one, is because they are so organic as actors that they understand how to do something that maybe they wouldn't have originally done, but make it seem true to the story and true to their characters. And it's like, well, there's absolutely a reason why I would turn back to him here,
Right.
facing the camera, obviously, which doesn't force a cut. Or, by the way, deliver a line in such a way away from camera and know the exact moment when to turn away that you don't want to cut to it. So I think that's part of it, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, that's the exciting thing when something kind of grows into, like, it's very exciting to be on set where it's like you're kind of take rehearsal and then like take two or three, you're kind of just getting to the point where like, oh, this would really be special, and then everyone's on board by five and six, and like
Yeah.
at the monitor, it's like really and then you do a few more.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I do obviously the level of talent and is huge. And the other thing I was going to say we are talking about, which is geography. Like, can the camera do something interesting with the geography of a location? Can we
Yeah.
can we push in on the only office that's lit up in the middle of the night, or can we just and or can we come off of something interesting and be wrapping around something when someone comes back in the other way, which even if it's on a dolly and a small, I was referring to it as more of like boiling water, like just building tension. And when these slower oneers, where it's like I
Yeah,
love these big Steadicam oneers, but that
yeah,
is about, like you're saying, it's about change, whether it's camera or whether it's the tension in the scene. But anyways, just to speak to that point, that thing that we were talking about, which I think is a great quote, you probably should have started with before I started rambling, is when Bateman saying, I don't know, saying to us like the idea that when you cut, you tap someone on the shoulder, you're tapping the audience on the shoulder when you cut. And I think that's so, like, if you think about it,
great.
that's true whether the audience is, whether you're just cutting to a reverse of someone saying like, sorry, I didn't come to your, quinceanera, or you're like cutting to someone's head getting smashed against the wall. Like, it's information, it's new information, and you're using a cut to do that. So if you have a scene where you're able to have some cinema in the geography and some cinema in the lighting, and there's just people moving in an interesting way, and you're just slowly pushing in, or you're pushing through a window, or you're losing them for a moment and then pushing in, all this without the cut, you're just doing this thing where I think the tension's always just kind of incrementally increasing.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's kind of be like the camera can be kind of an elegant partner rather than like a very showy partner, although they can be beautiful as well.
But I
Anyway,
think that's fantastic, and that quote is so right because basically, you, every time you cut, you're not allowing the audience to make decisions on what. I mean, we were talking about the fact that there's a breakdown that Don Devine did on Panic, which if people haven't seen, they should see. It's a static two shot on Bill Macy and Donald Sutherland, and it never cuts.
right.
And just the idea that Don was talking about the fact that you get to be the editor, you get to decide whether to look at Bill or look at Donald Sutherland, and it plays, and it's so amazing, and that doesn't even move. But the interesting thing is that shot aside, as you were talking about this, I was sort of thinking of this. There's that thing of like sharks need to swim or else they'll die. And in a weird way, it's like a oneer is almost like that. It's not necessarily that the camera needs to move. It's
Yeah.
that something needs to move in the scene, or the camera needs to move. Or again, it needs to continue building. So do you ever have those situations where a director comes to you and says, "I want this scene to be a oneer. How do we make it work?"
Yes.
I sense that from your response that those are not always great situations.
Yeah, I mean they can be. It's like it's hard, it's a balance, especially in episodic work. I mean, I've been lucky enough to be on, episodic work that has enough time
Yeah,
do things, and really, really focuses on the cinema of it all. But yeah, it's tough. It's like for me, everyone's different. I've worked with great operators. I've watched great operators work that just will just design it all themselves, and I've done that, and to some success at times. But it's not the atmosphere that I thrive in. I feel like everyone complements each other. If everyone's doing their job and is open, and you use the term benevolent dictator, it's like that's fine too. It's like
yeah,
coming is like from a director. So, but for me, whether it's the director they don't have to know exactly how to do it, but they need. There's a really famous book on acting, directing actors called The Sense of Direction, and I feel like as a camera operator, I also need a sense of direction. It
yeah,
doesn't have to be. You don't have to direct the camera. You can say I just want to wonder, but what are you telling me creatively or story wise or character wise that's going to help me do that? And I think that was why working with Laura Linney was so inspirational, because I worked with her. We worked with her on her first time. She was directing episode 11 of season 4, and she had
she
never
was
directed
amazing.
motion before. She was incredible because
She was
she gave
amazing.
everyone a sense of direction, whether it
Yeah,
was, and I had the opportunity to prep a bunch with her, which was nice, and so as we both did for like the bigger climax scene. But also just in small scenes, just kind of hearing what she had to say, like, this is the reason I don't want to see this person. Okay, well, that gives me a million things to think about as a camera operator. When am I going to see that person? What can we come off of in the scene about, whatever the scene's about, whether it's in a, whatever kind of location, how can we hide this person? And sometimes Laura would have very specific ideas, too, with camera. There's a shot that like looks like a real camera operator shot in that episode where Ruth is on the plane, and it's super subjective. It's like the most subjective shot.
oh yeah,
It's totally
I know what you mean.
Laura's. And Ruth's like looking out the window out at a green screen, but with a beautiful sunset later, where we're on her and we're on a slider the whole time. It's like but it's like purposefully. Don't get mad, everyone. So Slider's just a tool. It's not a four-letter word. It's a six-letter word. So
Yeah.
we're dollying at Ruth, like kind of very slowly, and then we're panning, like the camera's just panning to the window and then panning back to Ruth. And it's like, it was beautiful the way he did it. And I think we played music or something. I don't know, something that made it kind of work. And in my thought, in my sort of, I don't use the word cynical, but I was like, I really hope they don't cut this shot up. And because it was just Laura's shot. It wasn't like, I mean, as much as she's influenced by Ozark and the aesthetic, and we achieved that, you know, a lot of times, it was a very subjective shot in a way that I hadn't seen on that show either. And the whole thing's there, and it's just very cool. It's kind of like, I don't know, like Wong Kar-wai-ish, or I don't.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And it's interesting you say that. I don't remember that, but it rings true that she would say, I don't want to see this person until this point, and this is why. And actually, I really enjoyed that about her because, look, as an actress, she had talked to me about her process and how much she totally gets into the script and understands every nuance of every word. And I mean, she's so prepared. And as a director, it came out. But what it makes me realize, and now looking back, I'm realizing she did, you know, with both of us, more so with you because you were an A camera for her, was to say, this is what I'm trying to achieve, but not saying this is how I want to achieve it. And so she was sort of going, this is what the end of the equation is. You tell me what the equation, you know, you tell me what the numbers are. They get us there, which allowed you and I, to a lesser extent, the ability to fill that in and show her things which I remember very specifically her going, that's not quite it. Is there something else? And then we tweak it.
Right.
But
Right.
she so knew what she wanted. And I so appreciated that as a new director, that she didn't try, and maybe it's because she's an established actress, she didn't feel like she had to prove, or I don't know what, but she didn't try to sort of like mainstream the entire process and control everything. She just was like, I just know where I want to go. You tell me how to get there. And it was, I mean, that's why that episode is so fantastic. And she kind of blew me away.
Maybe said it was one, you know, he's like one of the best episodes he had. And it was not it was definitely like a mid-season.
On paper, it was not a huge episode.
Yeah, not a great script in the sense that like, none of the writers are going to watch this anyways, but you know, it's a solid script, but it's not important. You know, there aren't any big, you know, it's like this thing where it's about Jason's like internal rage and all these like kind of side things. And it just wasn't you know, on paper. Yeah, it wasn't.
It was part of the journey, but she looked in there and found an amazing episode and created an amazing episode. So I'm wondering if this is the way that when you're trying to set up a oner for someone that hasn't designed it, and they're, you know, hey, here are these 4 characters. How do we do this in one shot? And you're like, oh God. What I try to do is I try to find something that I think works, and then we try to sort of workshop it and rehearse it and see if it works. And the thing that I always try to do is go, if we get to a point where I feel like I would want to cut as an editor, then either we have to fix something or change something. Sometimes it doesn't work, but is that sort of do you think, is that a litmus test that you use, or how do you decide if it's working?
I think that's very well said. I don't know if I use that as much. I mean, for me, it's like, there's this level of stress to it where it's like, just don't turn to me after we've lost the actors and say that, you know, and I don't mean to make it about the process rather than the amazing cinematic product. But yeah, it's like, when are you comfortable? When are you either secure enough or insecure enough to involve another opinion, you know, in the blocking? Because it ends up being like, you know, sometimes it's easy. Sometimes I can see, I mean, that's the other thing about the easy part about the slow push in stuff. And listen, there's a lot of shots that are oners on Ozark, many of which I didn't do, that are very dynamic and not slow push-ins and conceived on dolly. So not to say that's the only way to do this at all. But
of course,
the thing about building the tension is like, often you can kind of, you see the geography of the location, you see the basic of the blocking. And I feel like sometimes I can, you know, even if I can just be like, well, if this person was just here for this line, I think it would work. And then they see the first row, and then it's like, oh, that will work. And then, you know, a lot of directors will, you know, have a good idea and say, oh, and also this person could come in now, or, you know, to start it. So it's like, it has to be kind of, the stressful time is when someone just like wants a oner and you don't see it, you know, obviously, like you said, like you're just like, this thing is all over the place.
Yeah.
It just feels really, you know, it can feel, and sometimes you just need, you know, you need to be able to pace the scene. I mean, and this might be obvious, So you're going to edit this. So good. This is not a good point.
I'm gonna go completely without editing so that you just ramble. I love it.
So so this is just an interesting, since we're going on and on. There's this
Yeah.
movie that's really good film
This is, by the
called
way, what our retirement is going to look like. But we're both on the front porch,
right, right. It's
and it's
on
gotten it's
Zoom.
gotten dark a
Right,
long time ago,
right,
and we're still yapping. Yeah.
right. This is the black screen. Um, there's this movie, Another Round, that I don't know if it won the Oscar. Nominated Denmark, from Denmark. Mads Mikkelsen's the lead. It's about these four
Oh,
friends that are like choose to become alcoholics together. Essentially, I recommend
okay.
it. It's great. It's a very good representative, like very elegant European kind of handheld. It's very like, Northern European in its taste, and it
Yeah.
very well photographed, but simple. But there's not a ton of coverage in the movie, but there's a scene there's a big scene where they all have dinner together. It's one of their, forget, someone's birthday or something. These four men, it's like their night out together away from the families. It's a very heteronormative film. So, and they're all drinking, and there's a ton of coverage. Like they're cutting, and and I was like, what? And then I watched it, and I watched the movie, and I watched the movie again because I made a movie with a friend, and he really loved the movie and the director, and he wanted to reference it. So I watched it. I've seen the movie like 3 times now. But
Hmm.
like, it's just like they just needed shots. Like it was just four guys sitting at a table. Like it wasn't going to feel rollick and just because they were going to act drunk. Even though Mads Mikkelsen's like one of the best actors alive. It's like they needed the shots, and sometimes you need the shots. Like I think tables are really good examples where it's like, as a director, like you want to be able to really control the pacing later,
Yeah.
because there's not a lot of like, yeah, you can do like a circular dolly or whatever, it's like, but there's just a need for that. Anyways, I don't really know what my point is. It's just like going back to what you're saying, it's like, yeah, there's stressful situations when someone asks you to like help make a wonder where you don't see it. I think often it's like when I feel confident at the situation, when I feel confident so to say something that's usable, when I feel confident about suggesting something that wasn't there, it's like when I feel like it's like 60 to 80% there, or there's just one thing I can do to change it drastically that I can pitch and make
Yeah.
sense of.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
just and I guess I just spend a lot of time. I mean, I've been lucky enough to prep some projects that I've been on, which is not
Which
always the
is
case with
huge,
operators.
right? Yeah. Which is
But
huge.
also, just it's just like you just listen, like you listen to people, because people talk about what they want, and even if talk back to Laura, who actually does have really good taste in camera, but even if they say they don't, not camera experience, they're constantly saying things they're interested in. So if you can pitch something back to someone, it's a bit of I don't want to say it's like you're bullshitting, but it's like you want to be able to pitch ideas to a director really, obviously, respectfully. I mean, like that's a given, but also you're like the idea that you're creating a big adjective around there now. Like you're like,
Yeah.
this is what you're saying. I'm hearing you say this. This kind of shot might do this even more. I think I'm okay at it, and depending on who you ask. But
I think you're very more than
Ed
okay
Seminoff
at
was
it.
always really good at
Yeah.
um, kind of reimagining things.
Yep. Yep.
But he was also like a
Well,
huge part of studying to look at that show. So yeah,
yeah, and the funny thing is we're talking about the Oners. It's like the Oners are always fun, and they're fun when they work. They're it's like getting surgery without being put under when they don't work because
yeah,
it's so painful.
of course.
But at the end of the day, it's like, I don't know about you, but I look at something and I go, look, this could really elegantly work as a oneer, but I'm just as happy when I go, this can really elegantly work as three shots,
Right.
and these connect, because it's about, at the end. I think what I get frustrated by is sometimes when I get asked to hey, can we make this as a oneer, and it's just like, you don't want to say it, but what you really want to go is, I can make anything as a oneer, but it doesn't mean that we've told the story the best way that we can.
Right.
Because, I mean, a really phenomenal example of that is, I don't know if you've seen The Bear, but Gary Maloof does amazing work in The Bear. In season 1, they do this whole episode that is one shot that, when you hear about it, you're like, oh, it's a gimmick. And it's like, because of how they did it and what's going on in the story, I think
Yeah.
it would have been wrong to tell that story in any other way, because
Yeah.
things are going. It starts out innocently enough, and then things go
Yeah.
crazy because there's a bunch of things. But then in season 2, they did I think the final episode, another oneer, which is very different and totally works, but and it could have kept going at a while, but they very specifically cut at a certain
Right.
point because the story, that's where the story goes, and
Right.
it's a great example of that. It's not about going being the impressive, like, oh look, I did the whole scene in a oneer. It's about going, hey, we shot this in a way that tells the story the best way that it can, and
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm just as excited to work for a director who wants to create 3 shots or 4 shots to tell, to tell three
tell the
pages.
story well,
Yeah,
right? I mean, and I think that's where I get to. I sort of look at it and I go, I think you owe a cut back here. And maybe what I'm thinking is not because the oneer has died, but just because the story needs to see this person's face at that point. And
yeah,
maybe the story needs to see this person alone at that point, separated from the other characters, because that's what's happening at this point, or whatever it
yeah.
happens to be. Yeah. And are there times where you've been asked to do something as a oneer and you do it, and as you're doing it, you're like, this just doesn't this
Yeah,
doesn't work.
totally. I mean, usually I feel like you can get out of that with like, just like, okay, could you shoot coverage on 2 people or even one person
Yeah.
sometimes?
Yeah.
If it's like a dynamic scene where it's about one person sort of isolate, like you say, isolation. But yeah, for sure. Um, I mean, the harder parts for me, I mean, is when you do something that's getting good and you're working with someone who just doesn't want to see it, or
Doesn't see it. Yeah.
doesn't see it, or just is the fear is a thing in our world. So
I'm going to
it's
get in
like,
trouble in editing,
yeah,
or post is going to be upset at me. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Or like or yeah, or it's also like, and I guess I don't know. I'm going to say this without, yeah, I'll say this really. There's a situation where I've been in, where you're asked to design something, and you do design something, and then people want to move on, but they're not the ones who design the shot.
Yeah.
So it's
Meaning
like,
you haven't gotten it and they've decided you have,
yeah,
and yeah.
exactly, exactly. So it's like you've given me the power to sort of be very involved, or the creative say, because I don't really look for the power, but
Yeah.
the creative say to be very involved in blocking and designing the shot. But then it's like 4 takes in, it's like, oh, I think we got it, and it's like,
Yeah.
well, give
No.
me a second, like let's talk, because like
Yeah.
it's hard, and that's the thing where it's like you're not the director, and
Well,
it's like,
I think you use the word power, but I think actually the reality is you've given me the responsibility for
yeah,
creating this shot and one thing, but what you're doing is taking the responsibility away from me, from saying we've gotten it the way that I envisioned it, and it's a weird thing, right? Because at the end of the day, they are the director and they have more things, but it's frustrating because you're like, if I can just tweak this one part, it goes from 80% to 100%, and
yeah,
we're not doing that, and we're going to walk away. Yeah, I've been there, and that's when you take the headset off and you walk out of the room,
yeah,
leave
yeah,
for
yeah,
20 minutes because you don't want to say something to someone, right?
right, yeah,
um,
absolutely. And then there's a lot. It's just got
Uh,
the
I think I'm gonna end it on that, Ari, because we're gonna get in trouble. But I will tell you, much to your chagrin, because we're talking about oneers, I am not gonna edit this and just leave this all in there, because I think it should play as one, all its warts and all.
okay.
And what we can do is we can re-record in about 20 minutes and do this entire thing again and do it better. But no, this was really interesting. I'm glad we did this, because actually it's a fascinating subject, because I think everybody talks about like oneers as this like, ooh, cool mystical thing, but sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and I
Right.
think part of the maybe joy and frustration of being an operator is being able to note when it is actually working that way and when it's not actually working that
Yeah.
way.
I mean, I would just say one thing that kind of think to build on that, and I was thinking as we talked about what's not working. I think of oneers the way I think of every single shot, and like the how is this place interesting to be framed? Like, how is the geography that we're living in, whether it's a racetrack or a closet, what's interesting about it,
Huh.
to frame, and how is the camera movement complementing the actor's movement? And I think about that with every single piece of coverage, and I think about that, with oneers as well. I just feel like that's the basis of how I think. A lot of people, can think and there's many
That's
people that do.
fantastic.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, that's a great way. And actually, it just made me think of something else, which is someone asked me, like I did a big oneer for West Wing, and someone said, is it overwhelming how big those are? And to what you were just talking about is it's the same to me as a slow dolly push in on a single on a single shot of a person. You just go, you break down all the hurdles, right? And you just sort of break it down. So it's the same thing as like you approach every shot the same. It's just that a big oneer has more pieces to it than a single does or whatever. But I love the idea of starting with what's interesting to look at here, and then how does that work with the actors in the frame, and going from there, because it gives you sort of a roadmap, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, a DP once said to me, like, the locations, they tell you how they want to be shot. Um, he's talented. He's very talented.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
That's
he can tell me,
fantastic.
he can just tell me what the location tells him will be
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Because you mentioned that to me, so I could figure it out easily. Do you, out of curiosity, are you ever in a location where you shoot it a certain way and then you finish, and like as you're walking away, you see something else and you're like, I've totally missed. I
Yeah.
completely missed that opportunity.
Yeah. Sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes. For
Well,
sure.
thanks for staying on and talking about this. This was actually I enjoyed this
Thank
a
you,
lot.
man.
One of the things about all these conversations is it makes me think of stuff, and I go, oh, you know what? Next time I'm going to actually consider that, because well, it's always about learning. So I appreciate
Yeah.
it.
I mean, I think, look, kudos to you. I think that the site is such a great resource. Like, if you, Cutchins and I joke, like, if you don't like, if you're not into the tediousness of filmmaking, well, maybe you're not really that into filmmaking.
That's perfect.
I feel like, if you're really into the tediousness of being a camera operator, I feel like it's an incredible resource. I mean, even if you're not, just want to watch a few things, I just think it's a great resource that you've developed.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and
Yeah.
hopefully it'll continue to. I mean, like I said, I've learned so much from it. So, and hopefully very soon, you and I will take more time and talk on a podcast and get that out there. But another time.
Cool. We
Thanks,
can just
man.
use this. All right. Thank you, man.
I'll talk to you. Bye.
Bye.